Welcome to the deep dive. This week we are taking on a custom request, really diving into the immediate geopolitical shockwaves.
Yeah, and the pretty massive threat of a tariff war that followed.
Exactly.
Huh.
All kicked off by Beijing's latest export restrictions on rare earth elements. They seem, well, perhaps the most aggressive yet.
They certainly feel that way.
And we want to go beyond just the headlines, the stuff from the Wall Street Journal to really understand the strategy behind it.
That's absolutely right. What we've seen really just in the last few days isn't just a slow creep. It feels more like a rapid, highly calculated deployment of an economic weapon.
The weapon, yeah.
Because rare earth elements, REEs, they're kind of the invisible foundation, aren't they, for almost all advanced global tech.
Right, like the motors in your new EV.
Or the radar in a fighter jet.
Mm.
And increasingly, the hardware that's powering AI. So our mission today really is to do a rigorous analysis based on what we've got the latest source material. We need to get a handle on the immediate drama first, the scope of these new Chinese controls, and that specific U.S. threat, a 100% tariff.
Which is just staggering.
It is. But then, maybe more importantly, we need to shift gears a bit. Think like business analysts. Understand the structural chokehold. How exactly does China's export control mechanism work? This highly centralized system.
And what does compliance actually look like now for, well, pretty much every manufacturer outside China?
That's the core of it.
So we're synthesizing the breaking news, but also looking at detailed compliance documents, right, from the Ministry of Commerce.
Yep, the MODOCs. And combining that with longer-term analysis of how the whole rare earth supply chain is structured.
This deep dive is really about pulling back the curtain, isn't it? On that bureaucratic complexity that makes China's dominance so, well, potent.
We're after those critical details, the ones that turn a news report into, a real understanding of geopolitical leverage.
We need to see these controls not just as trade rules.
No, definitely not. They're like a finely tuned instrument of state power.
Yeah.
China's basically showing they've perfected this particular weapon.
Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with the biggest threat this week. That Ministry of Commerce announcement and how the world reacted. All right, let's pinpoint the date. Thursday, October 9th, 2025. That's when it hit the fan, really.
Pretty much.
The Ministry of Commerce, the MOS, announces these new rules, and everyone saw them as, well, almost unprecedented expansion of export controls, a serious escalation in the U.S.-China trade fight.
And the element of surprise was key here, wasn't it? Sources are saying it was critical.
Yeah, dropped without any advance notice, not
yeah.
to the U.S. government, not to industry, just boom.
And the timing, it's just not random. This is where the geopolitical chess game really heats up.
Right.
Sources are confirming this landed right before that possible, highly anticipated meeting between President Trump and President Xi, maybe in South Korea.
So launching these controls just days before they might meet, that puts immense pressure on Washington's agenda right from the start.
Absolutely. It's a clear negotiating tactic designed for maximum leverage just before talks even begin.
Seems like a direct play to force the U.S. to back down on tariffs and its own export controls.
Widely seen that way, yes. It matches the demands China's negotiator, Vice Premier He Lifeng, reportedly made in Madrid recently.
It fits a pattern, maybe, responding to what some analysts called, quote, feeble actions from Washington.
Could be.
Yeah.
China sometimes does respond with these disproportionately strong market-shaking moves. It definitely raises the stakes.
And the clock's ticking on the bigger picture, too. That 90-day trade truce expires in November.
Exactly. So these rules are set to take full effect just before that deadline. It ties the future of tech supply chains directly to the fate of the whole trade deal.
Okay, so for global manufacturers, and, for you listening, if you work anywhere near tech, the big worry is how much broader these restrictions are.
Dramatically broader, especially how they now hit high-tech finished goods, not just, rocks out of the ground.
So what's new?
First, the list itself grew. 5 more rare earth elements added to the control list. Holmium, erbium, thulium, europium, and ytterbium.
And these aren't just any elements, right? They're critical for niche, but really important applications.
They are. They're mostly heavy rare earths, HREs, essential for specialized things. High-performance alloys, phosphors and lasers, medical scanning tech, military optics. So controlling these lets China tighten the screws even more on those high-end markets.
Okay, and then we get to the really staggering part, the bit that goes beyond raw materials into structural control. Mach Announcement 61.
Ah, yes, Mach 61. That's the real game changer. Why? Because it extends Beijing's licensing power extraterritorially.
Extraterritorially, meaning,
Meaning companies operating outside mainland China now need an export license from Beijing if their final product contains Chinese origin rare earths or oxides,
okay.
provided the value of those Chinese materials is 0.1% or more of the item's total value.
Right, let's make that crystal clear. So say a German company makes a catalytic converter in Berlin, and the cerium coating uses rare earth that originally came from China, even if it's a tiny fraction of the cost.
Like 0.1% or more.
Then that German company's shipment, made in Germany, now needs a license from Beijing.
That's what MO 61 mandates. It means China can potentially control the end use of products made by foreign companies using Chinese materials no matter where the factory is.
Wow, that's sophisticated leverage. It sounds a lot like the U.S. approach to restricting its tech globally, but applied to materials.
It's a stunningly sophisticated move. And as you said, it explicitly mirrors that U.S. approach. But China took it further. They specifically targeted dual-use items, things linked to defense or advanced semiconductor production.
Let's dig into those semiconductor thresholds. They looked incredibly specific.
Surgical, almost certainly deliberate. The new rules demand export licenses for two very specific types of cutting-edge chips.
Which are?
Logic chips made at 14 nanometers or below, and memory chips with 256 layers or more.
Why those numbers? 14 nanometers, 256 layers.
Because they're not arbitrary at all. They precisely mirror the thresholds the U.S. government uses in its own export controls.
Ah, the ones aimed at stopping China getting high-end AI and military hardware.
Exactly. When the U.S. restricted 14-nanometer logic, they were targeting advanced computing for military AI. So by picking the exact same thresholds, China is sending a crystal-clear message back to D.C.
Which is?
Something like, you restrict the export of finished chips and know-how to us. We're now restricting the fundamental materials you need to make those chips in the first place.
It's like a materials-based counterstrike. And then there's Notice 62, that targets the knowledge itself.
Precisely. Announcement 62 restricts exporting the technologies for the whole rare earth chain. Mining, separation, making magnets, and crucially, this includes the sensitive IP.
Like design drawings, process specs.
Yes, even simulation data. China seems determined to stop the transfer of the industrial know-how needed to build independent supply chains elsewhere, locking in their near monopoly on that vital midstream processing expertise.
Okay, this comprehensive expansion, it must have triggered a fast and pretty aggressive response from Washington.
It did. But first, the market reaction was immediate and severe.
Right. What happened?
Well, there was already some underlying volatility, but these rules just blew up the risk profile. Spot market prices for dysprosium and terbium.
Those critical heavy rare earths.
Yeah. They saw double-digit percentage jumps within weeks of that October 9th announcement.
That must wreak havoc on procurement.
Immensely. Suddenly, your multi-month contracts feel shaky. Manufacturers have to burn through contingency funds, pay huge premiums for immediate guaranteed supply. It messes up everything.
And then the political reaction. President Trump's response sounded pretty serious.
He quickly signaled that the White House saw this as an economic attack, aimed right at the tech sector. He threatened to, quote, stop doing that, meaning relying on Chinese imports.
And tasked his team to respond.
Immediately. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick were told to come up with a substantial retaliation strategy.
Which led to those reports, the WSJ articles, about a potential 100% tariff.
Exactly. Reports confirmed the White House was seriously planning to hit China with an additional 100% tariff, citing these rare earth restrictions as the specific justification.
100% tariff, that's basically shutting down trade in huge sectors. It really underscores how vital Washington sees access to these specific materials.
Absolutely. But before we get deeper into the political fallout, we really need to understand why this rare earth weapon is so effective. What's the basis of this dominance? Well, if you just look at the raw numbers, the sheer scale of global dependence, that's the foundation of China's leverage. Rare earths aren't just some niche minerals. They're vital inputs right across the economy, especially high-value manufacturing.
Yeah, maybe illustrating just how critical they are helps listeners grasp the vulnerability. Where do we find these things in everyday life and defense?
Oh, the list is huge. They're on your smartphone screen, things like europium, yttrium, high-precision camera lenses use lanthanum, specialized steel often contains them. But the dependence becomes really acute, almost terrifying, when you look at the green energy transition and defense.
Right, like EVs.
Perfect example. A modern electric vehicle motor relies on powerful permanent magnets. And those magnets need, typically, 1 to 2 kilograms of neodymium, praseodymium, dysprosium, and terbium, and PRDIIB. essential for making motors light and powerful.
1 to 2 kilos per car.
Okay, now scale that up. Think about those giant offshore wind turbines, the direct drive generator types. You might need up to 600 kilograms of the same elements for one single turbine.
600 kilos.
Yeah.
So China basically holds the accelerator pedal for the whole global shift to clean energy.
In many ways, yes.
Yeah.
Precisely. And then there's defense,
Wow.
where the dependence is just non-negotiable.
How so?
Rare earths are fundamental in guided missiles, sophisticated radar systems. They're essential for alloys that can withstand the extreme heat inside jet fighter engines.
So indispensable.
Utterly. One analyst put it starkly, calling this leverage a real vulnerability for U.S. AI companies.
AI companies, why?
Because those massive data centers powering AI need advanced cooling systems and other hardware components that rely on high-efficiency rare earth magnets.
Okay, this is critical. We have to distinguish between light rare earths, LREs, and the heavy ones, HREs.
Yes. This distinction is absolutely paramount if you want to grasp the true nature of the monopoly.
So what's the difference?
LREs think lanthanum through samarium on the periodic table. They're relatively more abundant globally. Mines exist in several places.
Okay, lights are more common.
Right. But the heavy rare earth elements, HEREs, that's europium through lutetium, plus yttrium and scandium, these are the scarcer ones. And much more valuable.
What? More valuable?
Because of their unique properties, especially their ability to maintain strong magnetism even at extremely high temperatures.
Ah, so that's crucial for things that get hot.
Exactly. Think EV motors running hard or components in defense systems operating under intense thermal stress. That heat resilience is why the HRE supply chain is the real chokehold.
Okay, so how does China dominate HREs specifically?
Well, overall, China accounts for maybe 60% of global mine production. Still dominant, but not total.
Right.
But the moment you isolate HREs, that dominance morphs into a near-absolute monopoly. Why? Geology. Almost all commercially viable deposits of AGEs are found in southern China's unique ion absorption clays and also across the border in northern Myanmar.
And the Myanmar output goes to China.
Exclusively for processing. So if you count that Myanmar output, Beijing controls more than 98% of global HRE extraction. And even more critically, somewhere between 95% and 98% HRE separation capacity.
98% extraction, 95% plus separation for the heavies.
That's the staggering number.
So even if the US or Australia managed to ramp up mining of the light rare earths,
Which they are trying to do.
they'd still have to go to China for the heavy rare earths needed for the most advanced high-performance magnets, for defense, for top-tier EVs.
That is the fundamental structural reality today. Mining is just step one. The real vulnerability, the bottleneck, is the midstream. Processing, separation, refining.
And China controls that globally.
Over 85% of global processing capacity for all rare earths, and roughly 90% of global magnet manufacturing capacity. This is why, for years, the U.S.'s biggest mine, Mountain Pass in California.
Which mostly has LREs.
Right. They had no choice but to ship their concentrated ore all the way to China for separation and purification. Because until very recently, the U.S. had basically zero operational midstream purification capacity.
And this wasn't just, luck or geology. This dominance was built deliberately, a strategic goal for decades.
Oh, entirely strategic. It wasn't an accident. Go back to 1985. The government introduced measures like export tax rebates, specifically to boost RE exports. Production doubled by 1990.
Okay.
But the really sophisticated pivot came after 2014. That's when the WTO ruled against China's use of formal export quotas and taxes.
Yeah.
Beijing had to dismantle those obvious trade barriers.
So how did they keep control without the quotas?
They shifted tactics, brilliantly in a way. They institutionalized control through domestic levers, stricter environmental enforcement, and state-led consolidation.
Environmental rules as a control method.
Well, yes. On the surface, it was about cleaning up a notoriously polluting industry. But the enforcement was selective. It tended to hit smaller, independent, maybe less efficient producers much harder.
So the effect was...
A drastically cut overall supply, which drove up global prices. And simultaneously, it forced the industry to consolidate under state control.
leading to these massive state-owned giants we see today.
Precisely. The whole sector got squeezed down from hundreds of players into basically two colossal state-owned enterprises. China Rare Earth Group, formed by a big merger in 2021, and China Northern Rare Earth Group High-Tech.
So the state controls everything now.
This concentration basically entrenched state control over the entire supply chain. It allowed Beijing to centrally manage output, pricing, everything, bypassing direct WTO violations by using domestic industrial policy instead. The risk shifted from trade policy tweaks to essentially a state-controlled tap.
Okay, now we get to the real guts of it. Understanding the bureaucratic machine that actually wields this control. If you're a manufacturer anywhere in the world relying on rare earths, you're now dealing with this complex system.
Yep, quotas and licensing. It's run primarily by the Ministry of Commerce, MOFCOM, as it's often called in the compliance world, but they coordinate closely with other powerful bodies like MIIT, the Tech Ministry, and NDRC, the Main Planning Commission.
So it's a whole government approach.
Absolutely. And this regulatory structure is the real lever. It rests on two main pillars working together.
Pillar 1.
Quotas. China sets annual limits on the total export quantity for various forms of REs, ores, concentrates, metals, alloys, you name it.
Annual limit.
Right. But they're typically issued in time-bound batches throughout the year. We've seen documents, like from 2012, for instance, showing just how detailed these batches can be, dictating exactly how much of a specific material can leave China, often month by month.
Okay, quotas set the overall limit. What's the second pillar?
Licensing. This is the enforcement arm. Non-automatic export licenses are the teeth of the system.
Non-automatic meaning they can say no.
Exactly. It's not just a rubber stamp. This licensing is how they administer the quotas and control who gets what. If you're trying to import magnets or refined oxides, you have to navigate this mandatory system. It controls monthly flows and ensures, in theory, only approved end users get the material.
Right. Let's try to put ourselves in the shoes of a foreign company, say a U.S. robotics firm needing specialized magnets. What's the actual process, the compliance burden?
Well, first off, the timeline itself creates uncertainty, fragility even.
How so?
The process starts with the Chinese exporter. They first have to secure their slice of the quota, get a certificate of quota allocation. Only after they have that can they even apply for the actual export license for your order.
Okay, step 1 is the exporter getting quota, then the license application.
Right, and that license review, it's notoriously opaque and slow. Typically takes 20 to 30 working days.
That's like 4 to 6 weeks. In manufacturing, that's
An eternity, which is why compliance advisors usually tell businesses, build in a minimum 45-day buffer just for the administrative approval when you're planning your production schedule.
45 days buffer. That forces companies away from lean, just-in-time inventory, doesn't it?
Completely undermines it. You have to hold more stock, tie up more capital.
And the information they demand. It's not just paperwork, is it? It sounds like it gets highly technical, maybe even proprietary, like forcing foreign companies to show their hand.
That's probably the most concerning part from a business perspective. Competitive intelligence, really. The central government demands incredibly detailed info to approve a license.
Such as?
First, an authenticated end-use certificate. This document has to explicitly state the product won't be used in restricted sectors, foreign military, nuclear, aerospace.
And it needs to be authenticated?
Often, yes. Signed by the foreign importer and then authenticated by a Chinese embassy or a notary public. So it legally binds the foreign company to how they say they'll use the material.
Okay, end-use declaration. What else? It gets into the material science.
Deeply. They demand granular technical documentation, things like chemical composition reports. For example, the exact percentage of heavy rare earth dopants like dysprosium D% and terbium PB% within the magnet alloy.
Wow, the exact recipe.
Pretty much. And also specific magnetic property test reports.
True.
Things like BH-Max and HCJ. Plus the standard product data sheets.
Okay, hang on. BH-Max and HCJ, can you quickly explain what those are and why Beijing would want that specific data?
Sure. BH-Max is the maximum energy product. Basically, it measures the overall strength and efficiency of the magnet, how much magnetic punch it packs.
Okay, magnet strength. What's HCJ?
HCJ is intrinsic coercivity, and this one's arguably even more revealing. It measures the magnet's resistance to being demagnetized, especially its ability to perform under high heat or when exposed to strong opposing magnetic fields.
Resistance to heat and demagnetization. Why does Beijing need to know that about a magnet going into, say, a foreign-made robot arm?
Because by demanding the precise HCJ value and knowing the DYTB content needed to achieve it, Beijing gets a window into the foreign manufacturer's design capabilities. High HCJ figures, achieved with specific heavy rare earth additions, signal that the magnet is built for demanding environments.
Like
Advanced EV motors that run hot, or components in aerospace, or certain defense applications. This proprietary data gives Beijing a real-time, incredibly detailed view into foreign R&D, performance specs, and potential supply chain weak points.
So it's data mining through export controls.
You can certainly see it that way. And there's more. They often require end-use verification photos of the magnet being assembled into the final product, photos of the actual application environment, proof it's being used as declared.
Photos on the factory floor. Wow.
Yeah, and we also know from historical documents, looking back before the recent changes even, that this licensing system was used to control who could even trade rare earths, even after the WTO supposedly banned discrimination.
How did they do that historically?
The way quotas were administered often included criteria that seemed inconsistent with China's WTO promises, like paragraph 5.1 of the accession protocol.
Which says?
Basically no discrimination. But historically, to even get a quota allocation, applicants often had to show things like prior export experience and past export performance.
Which naturally favors the big, established players, likely state-owned.
Exactly. And they also imposed things like minimum capital requirements. While China formally said they eliminated these explicit trading rights requirements, the formula used to allocate quotas to producers often still heavily weighted past performance production quantity, export value from previous years.
Creating a closed loop.
Pretty much. It effectively ensured that only the established, state-aligned companies could reliably get quota access, making it incredibly hard for smaller, newer, or foreign-linked firms to break in.
Okay, coming back to the latest rules, Monsi notices 61 and 62 seem to just solidify this total control architecture, covering both the material and the knowledge.
That's a good summary. Notice 61 is that extraterritorial control based on value hitting foreign-made items if the RE value hits 0.1%. And notice 62 locks down the export of the know-how design drawings, process specs for mining, separation, magnet making. Together, they signal a clear intent to control the entire global loop.
And presumably they can just deny applications.
Oh, yes. The denial criteria are quite broad, focusing heavily on national security. Applications are generally rejected if the items are destined for foreign military users, or if the importer or end user is on some kind of list of concern.
Which gives them wide latitude to cut off defense contractors anywhere.
Absolutely. It aligns with stated goals of non-proliferation, but the interpretation can be flexible.
And finally, there is that recent warning about stockpiling. That seems significant, too.
Hugely significant. It's a direct countermove to how businesses naturally try to manage risk. Authorities recently warned foreign firms, if you try to build up large inventories of rare earths or magnets, expect much tighter scrutiny.
So unusually large orders might get flagged, delayed, rejected.
That's the threat. Stockpiling is the standard way companies try to insulate themselves from supply shocks. By restricting that, Beijing ensures that any disruption they might orchestrate, whether it's administrative delays or a geopolitical move, will have an immediate, painful impact on foreign production lines. It keeps the leverage sharp.
So this whole system, the quotas, the incredibly intrusive licensing, demanding technical data, now cracking down on stockpiles, it's way more powerful than just a tariff, isn't it?
Oh, much more. It's a highly strategic, deeply embedded administrative weapon.
Okay, so this sophisticated weaponization, it translates directly into real vulnerability for specific global industries, right? Who's most exposed right now?
The immediate news and the structure of demand points clearly to a few key sectors. Electric vehicles, obviously.
Yeah.
Wind turbines, especially the big ones. Specialized consumer electronics.
Yeah.
And, of course, defense.
Which ones feel the pressure first?
Probably automotive and robotics, because they depend so heavily on those high-performance permanent magnets, the ones needing the heavy rare earths for efficiency and durability, especially under heat.
And even as other countries try to diversify mining, the core problem remains that processing bottleneck you mentioned earlier.
That's still the central point of fragility.
Yeah.
Outside China, the capacity to take rare earth concentrate and separate it, refine it into the pure, usable oxides, is severely limited.
And the expertise, too.
Critically, yes. The technical know-how for that complex chemical solvent extraction process, it's been built up almost exclusively within Chinese operations over decades, which is why Notice 62 restricting the export of that very technology is such a potent defense of China's near monopoly. They're protecting the bottleneck itself.
For manufacturers caught in this, it must mean higher costs, right? Even if they can find non-Chinese sources.
Absolutely. These restrictions are fundamentally reshaping global cost calculations. If you want to diversify away from China, sources suggest you're looking at maybe a 15% to 30% price premium for guaranteed non-Chinese material.
15 to 30% higher cost.
Yeah. And that's on top of the higher inventory costs you now need. because the supply chain is longer, riskier, even with the stockpiling crackdown. Plus, companies are pouring money into R&D.
Trying to find substitutes.
Exactly. Trying to design around the need for dysprosium and terbium in high-heat magnets. But that's a really tough technological challenge. Expensive, and success isn't guaranteed.
Given this level of vulnerability, how's the West, particularly the U.S., trying to respond? We hear about this mine-to-magnet domestic strategy.
The U.S. strategy is pretty ambitious. It involves using the Defense Production Act, the DPA, quite aggressively, and significant funding from the Department of Defense, the DoD, to try and kickstart resilient domestic supply chains.
The idea is to do the whole process at home.
That's the goal. Integrate mining, processing, magnet manufacturing domestically. We've seen some big investments announced, like DoD giving $30.4 million to Linus USA for light rare earth separation capacity down in Texas. The hope is they'll eventually produce maybe a quarter of the world's LRE supply outside China.
And they're also trying to tackle the financial risk, the reason previous non-Chinese ventures failed.
That seems to be the key innovation this time around. Historically, China could just flood the market with cheap, rare earths whenever a competitor popped up, driving them out of business.
Right, weaponizing low prices.
Exactly. So now look at MP Materials, the owner of the Mountain Pass mine. They've announced this huge partnership with DoD. Part of it involves a price floor. Reportedly, $110 per kilogram for NdPr neodymium praseodymium guaranteed for 10 years, plus $150 million in DoD loans.
A price floor. So the government basically insures them against China crashing the market.
That's the idea. It removes that existential financial threat from price volatility. It makes building these incredibly expensive midstream processing plants in the U.S. finally seem viable.
Okay, that sounds like a serious effort, billions being committed, but there's still that fundamental geological issue, right? The heavy rare earth gap.
This remains the critical, perhaps fatal flaw in the current Western strategy. It's the elephant in the room. Because the main deposits being developed outside China MP Materials Mountain Pass in the U.S., Linus's Mount Weld in Australia, they were overwhelmingly rich in light rare earth elements,
Okay.
LREs.
Not the heavies.
Very little HREs. So while both companies are building some HRE separation capacity, which is crucial, they still lack significant domestic sources of HRE ore to feed into those plants.
So, wait. Even with billions invested in U.S. processing plants, the most essential elements for defense, for high-performance EVs, they'll still rely on materials ultimately originating from Chinese-controlled mines or supply chains.
That is the hard geological reality. You can throw money at building factories, but you can't change the rocks underground overnight. Plus, extracting HREs from the types of deposits they're found in, it's chemically complex, often needs specific, tricky solvent extraction methods. China's decades of expertise there are hard to replicate quickly and cheaply. The bottleneck persists.
And the result of this persistent leverage, we're seeing rare earth politics directly influencing completely different areas now, like semiconductors.
That's probably the most stark geopolitical takeaway recently. Sources are confirming that this rare earth pressure played a direct role in the U.S. decision back in July 2025 to actually reverse some of its own semiconductor export restrictions against China.
Reverse them, like allowing sales that were previously banned.
Exactly. Washington reportedly granted licenses for high-end AI chips like the NVIDIA H20 to be sold to China chips that were previously restricted. There was even talk about removing certain chip design tools, EDA tools, from the control list.
So the rare earth squeeze was powerful enough to force a U.S. concession on semiconductors, a major U.S. security priority.
It strongly suggests that, yes, the immediate severe threat posed by Beijing's rare earth controls provided enough leverage to compel a policy shift on advanced chips. It shows the outsized influence of this relatively small market sector.
And because no single country outside China can fix this alone quickly, international cooperation is becoming more important.
Absolutely essential. You see initiatives like the U.S.-EU Critical Minerals Partnership, or the Quad Critical Minerals Initiative, that's U.S., Japan, Australia, India.
What's the goal there?
To pool resources, share technical knowledge, spread the investment risk, and try to diversify sourcing globally. It's a recognition that replicating the entire REE value chain, especially for the heavies, isn't something one nation can do alone. It requires a coordinated, multilateral effort. #outro.
Okay, so this deep dive really confirms it. This escalation we're seeing, it's far more than just another tariff argument.
Not at all. It's a highly strategic move. A deployment of a sophisticated economic weapon, really. Leveraging China's near-total structural control over that crucial midstream processing, and especially the indispensable heavy rare earth supply.
All enforced through this incredibly detailed, intrusive, compliance-heavy licensing regime we've dissected.
Yeah. The implication for global business, for anyone listening who relies on these materials, is immediate and profound. The era of just-in-time procurement, it's basically over for rare earths. You have to shift to a just-get-it philosophy. Prioritize guaranteed supply security, navigate that complex compliance maze
Above all else.
above almost everything else, or you face severe disruption from Beijing's increasingly centralized, precise, and powerful governance over this absolutely strategic resource.
A sobering thought. We definitely encourage you, the listener, to keep tracking the consequences, geopolitical, supply chain of these new restrictions. This story isn't going away. It's likely to define global manufacturing strategy for years.